think we'll go ahead and get started. I do think we'll have some other people pop in at some point, but we are really excited to have with us here today, and it sounds like some of you already know him, Dr. Michael Littlecrow. For those who don't know me, my name is Maggie Grandin, and this is the AIHEC Health Webinar Series today. So again, thank you for being here with us, and I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Michael Littlecrow. He is an Indigenous Math Educator who's deeply committed to promoting mathematics education and empowering learners from diverse backgrounds. As a member of the Turtle Mountain Chippewa-Cree people, he co-founded Open Global Village, Original Peoples Education Network Incorporated, which focuses on supporting education abroad initiatives. The organization has successfully facilitated 3 education projects in Thailand and a sabbatical program in Kazakhstan, where Dr. Littlecrow taught mathematics through the exciting medium of robotics. His dedication to mathematics education includes active collaboration with the tribal education agencies of the Pascua Yaqui, River Pima-Maricopa Indian Community, Gila River Indian Community, and various Chippewa nations in North Dakota and Wisconsin. And Dr. Littlecrow, feel free to correct my pronunciation. The academic positions he has held throughout his career include serving as an instructor at Oregon State University from 1998 to 2004, residential faculty at Scottsdale Community College from 2004 to 2018, and currently he holds the position of teaching assistant professor at Arizona State University, as well as serving as an adjunct faculty at Southern New Hampshire University through Global Campus. His educational background includes a Bachelor of Science and Master of Science degrees in mathematics education from Oregon State University. He recently earned a Doctor of Education in Educational Leadership and Innovation at Arizona State University with an alternative dissertation medium of a podcast titled Professional Development for Math Educators, Amplifying Hearing and Understanding the Voices of Community Educators. Through his multifaceted roles as an educator, researcher, and student advocate, he continues to make significant contributions to the field of mathematics education, promoting inclusivity, empowerment, and the realization of human potential through the learning and understanding of qualitative principles and patterns, commonly referred to as mathematics. So I'm very excited to welcome Dr. Michael Littlecrow.
Hello, everyone. Bashu, speaking the Anishinaabe language a little bit, but it's good to see you all here today. Let me share my presentation. So hopefully it looks like that's coming up there. What I'd like to talk with you today about is what I call re-indigenation, the journey within, and it's a story of what many of us face, maybe growing up in the cities, being an urban Indian, but this need of, we've gone through this process of assimilation into the dominant culture. How do we get back to being an Indigenous person, and in my case specifically an Indigenous math educator, to tap into the power that we have when we understand who we are as an educator. So much of what I'm going to share with you today comes from my dissertation work, and that in itself was a sort of a culmination of 24 years of action research in looking at mathematics and how to teach it and how to learn it, and hopefully will springboard me into greater successes and work with tribal communities. So a few concepts and rules for the road. I follow this sort of precept given to us by one of our Anishinaabe elders from time immemorial. The statement is that all peoples have their origin story and they are all true. I saw this statement when I was visiting the Saginaw Chippewa tribe up in Michigan. I went through their museum, which is it's a walking museum. You see the course of the people, And I thought about this for a long time, and I thought, yes, everybody's story is true to them. And while we don't have to accept as our truth, we do need to accept everybody's story as their truth, and respect it and incorporate it. And that brings the inclusive part of nature. Also, we need to let others tell their stories. We can't really tell the story of another person not accurately. So this is my story, and anything I may mention about being an Indigenous person or this or anything it comes from my experience, my story. It's my truth. I don't intend to oppose my truth on anyone else, but just to share it, and in the intention that each of you who are listening today can see how it might apply to your own journey, to your own truth, in the way that you live. So this is going from living a completely assimilated life into becoming a re-indiginated person, finding who I am within. Again, I'm a bit of a contrary. I sort of grew up in reverse. And so now at this stage, the story always begins at its end, because how can you tell a story if it hasn't ended yet? So from the end, you see so much perspective and everything, and yet each of us is living a current story where we don't see that end. That end is still open-ended. But every time we tell a story, it's already been completed. We've had our successes, our failures, whatever has happened. So that's the perspective I bring to this presentation today. And in my way, I always like to start any discussions, any stories, any accomplishments I might have had in my life with a sharing of gratitude for the people who brought me to this point in my life. First of all, is Dr. Pentong. Without her support, without her direction and leadership, I would not have been able to even engage in the graduate work I did, which really helped me to understand so much. Also, along with her is my committee. Sorry, I lost my screen here. There we go. Dr. Weinberg, Dr. Wolf, and Dr. Eskew, who were on my committee and very helpful in my growth and understanding. And then a number of people in the Fire Circles community. I'll explain how that was developed and who's involved in it. But it's a growing community of educators that are on a journey to find ourselves and find our people and find learning success for our students. So to kind of get the background, this is my story. This is how I see things, that we have three components in everything we do. There's our intellectual, our spiritual, and our emotional. But these are not separate items. They overlap. And so for me, I saw within the overlap of the spiritual and emotional, I saw that native ceremonies that I experienced, the sweat lodge, medicine bundle ceremony, even powwows, the gathering of the community, and my teacher, Donlin Many Bad Horses, who would run a village, that all these ceremonies were kind of in this confluence of the spiritual and the emotional aspect of my life. Between the intellectual and the spiritual, that's where I brought in the study of ethnomathematics. I read the book on the Quipu of the Inca, how the mathematics has evolved there. I looked at the Mayan mathematics, Vedic mathematics from India, but it was 3,000 to 5,000 year old mathematics as a foundation. And then also looking at indigenous mathematics, how indigenous peoples in the Americas saw mathematics and used it. And this intersection of the intellectual and the emotional, well, that's where all my math education work has come. I taught at the Education Opportunity Program at Oregon State University and developed a community math approach using Math Excel from a professor, Dr. Tom Dick, who put this way of learning math in a social environment, working with the Salt River Pima-Maricopa people, and mindful math with help from Dr. Pentong, and then even what I have come to call industrial math at Arizona State University, where I teach classes of 150 students at one time. Maybe to some successes, maybe not to as much as I would like, but so all of these things, that intersection of the intellectual and emotional. And there's one space left. Of course, there's always our completely spiritual, maybe completely intellectual and completely emotional, but there's a place in the confluence of all three. And that I refer to as the Buddha Dharma. The Dharma is the teachings of life, to understand the world just as it is, just as it occurs, and then with the goal of taking appropriate action. And for me, that appropriate action was working within the development of what's the fire circles, the professional development for math educators, to make classrooms, math classrooms specifically, less Western centric, to decolonize, if we would say, to make the math classroom a place that was inclusive of all ways of thinking and seeing and doing things. So when we start any journey and we see a long way ahead of us, it's good to have a purpose in mind. And the purpose I see is a quote from Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed. I read this in the 1990s when I started back, 1998, I believe. It was Dr. Margaret Fox suggested this book to me, and I started reading it. I found it very interesting. But this one always stuck in my mind. It's Freire is saying here that the greatest humanistic and historical task of the oppressed is to liberate themselves and their oppressors. But the oppressed must not, in seeking to regain their humanity, become in turn the oppressors of the oppressors. So which so often happens, but rather we must become the restorers of humanity to both. And it's this last sentence. It says, only the power that springs from the weakness of the oppressed will be sufficiently strong to free both. And so I thought for years, what is the power that resides within our weakness as oppressed peoples? What is this weakness that has, when applied properly, really has this power to restore humanity? And so that's my driving force. What I came from after much reflection was that the power that springs from our weaknesses is our compassion. And I found it sort of empathized in the words here from the man known as Chief Joseph. He said at this time, as he had taken his people on a flight from the Union soldiers. They had lost many. At the end, he was surrendering. It just said, it's cold and we have no blankets. The little children are freezing to death. My people, some of them have run away to the hills and have no blankets, no food. No one knows where they are, perhaps freezing to death. I want to have time to look for my children and see how many of them I can find. Maybe I shall find among them the dead. Hear me, my chiefs, I'm tired. My heart is sick and sad. From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever. So it's not the power of warfare, not the power of a warrior that can really free us from this cycles of oppression. It is this compassion for the people we serve, as Chief Joseph here was saying. And I will use his native name, Hinmato Yatlakut. I apologize for my pronunciations, but so he was a great man, and I guess I'm honored because I look back and in the fourth grade, I became friends with a great grandson, maybe a great great grandson of Chief Joseph, Frank Joseph, and I remember that time in grade school, and he told me some of his stories of his ancestry here. But to meet people and to become connected, that is our strength. That's comes from the weakness, because that weakness allows us to be oppressed. We will choose to be oppressed as people so that we can help those who are weaker, the children, the older and such. So this led me to look within myself, and I see sort of a dualistic framework. I find myself going back and forth between an Indigenous person wanting to live in a way that's within myself, but then the things that come with being an industrial person, the industrial world, the benefits, everything that draws us in, and maybe that's what what I grew up with, certainly. And how do I become sort of a whole person that goes beyond either, that has the benefits of both, maybe. And I find myself living in that confluence because I'd like to help as many people as I can help with the way I teach. To do that means serving a lot of people, but then that means maybe I don't get to connect as deeply with some as I would like. So how do we find a solution to all this? How do we find a way of working through relationality? And so just to give you an example of a few things, this is some older research I've done, is where does mathematics really start? Where does it come from? And one of the things I find is that it's in how we use our hands, how our people have used their hands to define the groupings. The Babylonians, which are the ancestors of the English-speaking people of the world, they use their hand to count to 12 on the fingers, and then they use the other hand to count how many 12, so that got them up to 60. So a base 60 system with a base 12 in there. And that was one sort of system. But in Asia, from ancient India, actually, the schools of mathematics there was a way of seeing mathematics as grouping numbers into powers of 10. And so I present this one language, a Thai language. And a lot of times when we're learning languages, we focus on learning 1 through 10, and then we stop. But it's after you get to 10 that you actually get to see the cultural mathematics within that language. And when you look at the Thai language, you see that when you get past 10, the word 11 is literally sip et, which is literally the word 10 with one more. So they make a change of the one. And sip song, you see, it's 10 with two more, sip song. So it is a language based on 10 as being a complete number. And then the powers of 10 that come from it. And then even further, you'll see that 1,000 is, well, we have the word thousand, so that's, that would be equivalent to their word pun. But we speak of 10,000. 10,000 is not a power of 10, it's 10,000s, right? But in Thai language, they've actually, it's one un, and 100,000 would be one san. So they have words that describe these various powers of 10. We have a few of those, a million, a billion, but we don't have as many as many Asian languages have. So there's some difficulties with the English language. We see that when we get to 10, 11 is not 10 with one more, it's 11, and 12 is not 10 with one more, it's 12. But then we get to 13 and we start seeing this word teen, which is 10, which speaks to being a base 10 language afterwards. But we see the words up till 12 as carrying the implication that this is a base 12 language that was used. And we'll go on. In Spanish, it becomes even more complicated. We see the word for 10, diez. We don't see the word for 10 incorporated into the number with 11. No, it's once, doce, all the way to quince, which is 15. It's not till we get to 16, dieciséis, that we see the word for 10 and then 6 more. And then the little I do know of Hispanic culture, I know that 15 is an important passage for young girls. It's when a young girl becomes a woman at 15. So it's embedded in their language. It's embedded in the culture of how they saw completion, but it's not base 10. In the Chippewa language, Algonquin, we see sort of a patterning. I see a couple different patternings here. So you see 5, 6 is literally this word ning goes for 1. Wasawi is like 5. Nij wasawi, 2 above 5. So it's got both a system of counting to 5 on one hand, and then 10 madaswi, which is got the feeling of 2 hands. That's our 10. And then when we get to 11, madaswi ashet beshwi, literally 10 with 1 more. So it's a base 10 language. And when we use this language, we see how these people group things and counted things, and that their mathematics of the Algonquin speaking people is in sync with the ancient mathematics of India, which is the math we use today. The Yaqui language, I was doing a workshop with some presenters from the Yaqui cultural department, and they were talking about how the Yaqui had traveled and they'd gone down into Mexico, and when I saw those places, I saw they were living amongst the Mayan people, and they traveled north and into the Arizona, but they also went over to California. And then as he was speaking of all the travels of the Pascua Yaqui, I started looking at my language for their numbers. And I know from the Chumash in California, they use sticks between their fingers to count. So they had a base 8 was what they worked with. And within the Yaqui language, you can see 4 is Naki. Again, I apologize for my pronunciation, but 8 is Wonaki, 2 4s, 2 groupings of 4. So they incorporated the mathematics of the people they traveled to. The Mayans had a base 20 system, and you see within the Yaqui language, they've incorporated this base 20, Sinu Taka. Taka is a 20. And then you see for 40, Wotaka. So literally 2 takas, 2 20s, 80, 4 20s. So you see that they have the base 20 built in, and even 1,000 has the word for 20 built into it. So they were greatly influenced by the mathematics of the Mayans. At the same time, we see that it's also got a base 10 built into it, Omani Ama Sinu. So we see these words speak to a base 10 language, which they would have been exposed to as well. So a very rich use of language, and as they traveled, they adapted their mathematical language to fit the people they were living close to and with. And I think that's the way Indigenous people come to think of ourselves, is that we will adapt, we will incorporate things, but we still at our levels, we stay who we are as well. So a little bit on the use of this base 10. Here's an older map of the world, 500 AD about, and what we see at the center of this sort of known world at its time, again, there is a whole other world on the other side, but in the center was what at that time was called the Gupta Empire, India. And there's schools of mathematics there. And from there, the mathematics that we use today spread, this base 10 spread throughout the world. So I wanted to share a little bit of how that type of mathematics involves relationality and complements of numbers, and how it involves a different type of thinking than we have typically been taught through our school systems. So first of all, in the mathematics that comes from India, sort of the deepest part of the internal, 3,000 to 5,000 years ago, they saw numbers within a circle. And so they had these sutras. And so the number system was always built by one more than before. So you're adding on 1. So if you got 1, you get your 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And so that becomes a complete circle. And then by putting numbers in this circle, we can see how relationality is involved in this. Because as we look to either side of the 10, we see the complements of 10. 9 and 1 complement each other to make a full 10. 8 and 2, 7 and 3, 6 and 4, 5 and 5. 5 complements itself. And so I've come up with sort of just a way of looking at numbers as being pairs of complements to 10. There's also, in their mathematics, they use a circle of 9. And again, the nice thing with the circle, we can go to the left or the right. We can go sunwise or counter sunwise. But we see the same sort of pattern. 8 and 1 are 9. 7 and 2 are 9. 6 and 3 are 9. 5 and 4 are 9. And then we've got one more pair. 9 and 0 are 9. So those, the way they did their mathematics is they would understand these relations, and then from there they would build. I'm going to share just one brief thing. I've got several workshops I've done that can take us 6 days or 3 or longer if we want to explore all of these. But here's a quick way how we could use our hands. So we could take 8 times 7, and what you'll see here is you've got the complements of 10. So 2 complements 2 and 8 are 10, and so those are in the down fingers. Complement of 7 is 3. So that's how we use our 2 hands to build the numbers 7 and 8. And then to multiply them, what we do is we see the fingers that are up in the air. We count each of those as 10. And so there's 5 of them, that's 50. And then we can multiply the down fingers, which are the complements, 2 times 3, and we get 6. So we get 7 times 8, 8 times 7 is 56. And this works for all these numbers between 6 and 10. A kinesthetic way to learn how to multiply that can be helpful for all our students, but especially Indigenous students, because again, we understand that the way we do math comes from the way we see our hands. So 6 times 8 is 48. 2 times 4, the down fingers. So now with just those kind of brief examples that I've shared, and I have others, and we can look at ways of doing mathematics that are different. Again, addition and subtraction facts are the same, but sometimes our approach to getting there can make students feel more included. So this was the goal of the professional development I was part of. And one of the things I was at a workshop on doing work in tribal nations, and the speaker asked us that whenever we begin our work, we need to know our purpose. Why are we doing what we're doing? And so these are from my notes I wrote down from that workshop. I said, my work is driven by belief that the central purpose of education is to embrace the complexity inherent in building relationships, which must take into consideration the protection of and benefit of the collective as well as the individual. So while we work to build our communities, we also have to build ourselves. And that's what we work through. So working with, I think there was 5 of us. There's Velma Mesa, Dr. Mesa from University of Michigan, or is it Michigan State? I mix those up. I think it's University of Michigan. Beline, I'm going to forget names. I get this blocked now. Frank, Claire, I think that was it. Yeah. So there's 4 of them. I guess I was the 5th one. And we just, we were working and looking for a conception. So we came up with this because up in the North Lakes, there was a confederation of 3 nations, the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and the Potawatomi nations. They had this conception of the fire circles to protect each other, to help each other grow. The Ojibwe were seen as the older brothers. They were the keepers of the faith. The Ottawa were the Middle brothers. They kept the trade going, and the Potawatomi, the younger brothers, were the keepers of the fire. So we incorporated the 4 R's of Indigenous education. As Beline always helped us understand that relationality, respect, responsibility, and reciprocity, all these things, from the beginning, to respect other people's stories, other people's truths, and to be able to understand them so that we can work with them in relationality. So in my research, what I was doing is I was following up after the fire circles, after we had gone through a few rounds of professional development. And so my work was looking at how Indigenous epistemologies were used within the fire circles, how we incorporated self-determination theory and adult learning theory, and how those things will empower our work in all education going forward. So we had applied for a grant. We did not get that grant, but that was sort of the good thing, is we were able to develop what we saw is needed, and that was the fire circles that we developed. This podcast was sort of a follow-up to create an oral history of some of the participants. What did they experience? What did they benefit from that? Some of the questions I had going into this was, what were the characteristics that math educators looked for in professional development? What approaches were math educators in tribal communities, especially, what were they using? How about the curriculum development process? Who was involved? Who wasn't involved? How was the process implemented? And then looking at what these people had to say about any systematic ways that might limit opportunities to incorporating alternative ways of knowing. So I'm going to go ahead and start playing this. Hopefully it won't be too loud. Let's see, and hopefully you'll be able to hear it. This is my teacher, Donlin, many bad horses at one of his villages that he ran for us. He'd come for, it was a 3-day event, and he would start off like this with song and around the circle. And during this time period, he would ask us to look up to the heavens, to put whatever questions we had about our lives or what we wanted to do, what we wanted to reveal to ourselves, send that up to the heavens. And then over the 3 days of living in community, he told us, you will all find the answers to whatever questions you have. And it seemed like on that 3rd day, when we would talk, we would always come back and say, yes, our questions were answered. And of course, sometimes that as one question is answered, another question arises. And I think that's been the key to my work. And today, I certainly don't intend to answer all the questions or provide answers to everything, but I'm hoping that maybe as you look at the work I've done, as you looked at the journey I've been on, maybe it will help you ask a few questions yourself, because those questions can direct our work into doing something that is powerful for our people. And this is what I based my research methods on, was Donlin's way of, put your questions, and I could now say, put my research questions up into the heavens, and let this oral way, this way of interacting with people, reveal to me the directions I needed to go, the things I needed to do. And so these are the answers I found from within my community by conducting 5 podcasts from participants. I had some great conversations with them over a period of time. And these were some of the highlights I gleaned from their words, not using qualitative research software to kind of go through it, but simply by listening to their voices. I listened to them when I did the podcast, when I did the interview, and I tried to, make it more of a conversation. I listened again as I went to edit and make it the conversation as smooth as possible. I listened again after I done final edits to make sure that those were the final edits. I sent them to the participants after that, where they listened to it and they gave me feedback. And then I would listen to them one last time again. And it was by having all these voices going inside my head that I started making these connections, not through some external software that was going to highlight how many times people said this or that or anything, but simply using the oral traditions of our peoples, the same way that Donlin had been using, working in community. And these are some of the things that I found, is that the characteristics that the people were looking at, that in the fire circles, we would suggest some readings, everyone would do them, and those would give us some examples of the conversations. As we worked through, the participants were able to, we looked to them to suggest some more articles, so that opportunity for them to engage with us as co-developers, and that we valued their input. They were really not participants, they were creators as well. So we didn't have two different groups of a group that was running the professional development, those that were being professionally developed. We were all gaining from that development. We had, and again, when I first put this together, I thought, okay, let's do this like traditionalists. That's what was so nice about working with people like Claire and Frank and Beline and Velma, is we saw a greater vision that we would all have multiple duties that we would do, and something like monitoring the Jamboard as things came in and highlighting and moving things around. She did a wonderful job. And another thing is that one of our participants, one of our co-creators, brought up the need that oftentimes we do need those university classes will help us. And his specific was learning how to bring gaming into his math education. Some of the approaches that they were using, as Jeffrey brought out, using game, and he developed a game where, I guess I'll go a little bit further, but it was, let's see if it's, he had done some work with birch bark canoes, and so he developed a game of where they had to collect the items to build a birch bark canoe, and there's some nuances in the way and when you collect and everything that were incorporated there. And that these questions that we have discussions on, that comprehension doesn't come right away. So it's not like while we're having the conversation, we begin to have all these insights, but those things continue after the discussions. Also, the importance of asking our students. Ivy was, her students, she was teaching, she taught both mathematics and Arapaho culture, and her students told her, we don't see ourselves in this math. And so she asked, well, what would you like to see? And from their questions and such, she created a curriculum where she took them out onto the plains, and they were looking for teepee circles. They couldn't find those, but they found buffalo jumps. And they had some nice, rich conversations about how their people were involved in that, getting out of the classroom, seeing all of this, having trust in our students' desire to learn. So much of education is we've got to, in fact, I've had a colleague who said, you got to keep your students' feet to the fire. And I thought that doesn't sound good. So I looked it up, and that was a form of torture used during the Inquisition, was to put people's feet to the fire. And to have an educator saying that that's what we need to do to our students to get them to learn. I think if we trust our students, that the reason they're in school is to learn. Maybe they're turned off by how we're running our classroom or something. Maybe that would be a better way than putting people's feet to the fire, to torture, right? So what about curriculum development? Well, if we can involve the whole community, and if we could see our elders as containing great knowledge, and Jeffrey and Joey both had this experience with the birch bark canoes, and how they went to their elders and residents and got some really good insights, and then how they could develop them into a curriculum. Karen brought up the need to listen to practitioners, people who are doing the work, and as you build your curriculum, having a cohort of people within the community that can help and review curriculum as it's developed to make sure it's appropriate. And one of the things that the voices said is in mathematics, especially, that we focus so much on the on reviewing and getting somewhere that it sometimes comes to be a show, copy, regurgitate for our students. And here's how you do it. You copy that down and then give it back on the test. Can we break that cycle down and make it into greater learning? And then in our assessments, how do we really measure the learning? Again, not a lot of specific answers. Again, we talk about it and we try things, but these questions will guide the work we're going to do. And what were some of the systematic mechanisms? Many of us don't see, we don't identify ourselves as being in that field, like an engineer or something. So our students oftentimes do not see themselves in these roles. So can we see people from their communities who are in that role? Oftentimes the state universities conform, they have their requirements for transfer that won't allow for alternative ways of knowing and seeing. And then school administrators themselves sometimes have their own agenda, not necessarily the agenda that the students need for their healing and moving forward. So as I reflected on this, I saw a way of bringing all the voices together within my head, living with those voices over a period of time where I could really listen to them deeply, listen to them actively, maybe even ask them questions. And it was like those voices from what was in their words would come back to me. And it was a collaborative development, that we need to collaborate in how we develop our curriculum. We need to lead by example. We need to be the leadership voice for our students, to open that way for them. And then again, this so important to really have faith that our learners are there because they want to learn. And if we put all these together, we can find a way to invigorate math education, to take approach to see our learners as adults, adult learning theory, applying it more even in the high school and middle school levels, to allow our students to have more autonomy in what they're doing. And so I think I'm about right on track. It's 11:15:45. So that's just my story. I'd love to hear from all of y'all, any questions you may have or comments.
Dr. Littlecrow, thank you so much for that presentation. It was just a great presentation. I do want to open it up to all of you here. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to unmute yourself. Nothing formal here. We would love to hear what you have to think or say.
Dr. Littlecrow, would you share your PowerPoint?
Of course. Yes, I'll be sending it to Maggie, and she's going to make it available with the recording. And in fact, since I think I can share it here, my technology. Oh, here we go. I've got a file. Let me go ahead. I'll put it in the chat, and then
I just got to figure out how to download it from the chat.
Exactly.
And Kathy, we will have it as Dr. Littlecrow mentioned, so we can definitely.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's good.
Get it to you.
It was so good. It's so interesting.
Well, thank you.
Reno.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Dr. Littlecrow if he would give us one more opportunity. We have been talking about hosting watch parties. So we have some other videos on Indigenous math or ethnomathematics. And if we presented that as sort of a thematic approach for our tribal college, tribal colleges, people are teaching math in those places. Would you like to join us so that we could ask questions of you directly in sort of a different setting?
I'd be very honored. And kind of, I didn't quite have the chance. I have a tooth infection, so I couldn't sleep last night. So I was watching, but while I was up, I was watching I got onto my television. There was this series on PBS on the buffalo. And one of the presenters was talking about, yes, we have restored buffalo, but they're like herds of cattle now. They aren't the spirit. And I thought of us, we as we re-indigenize, are we really just domesticated? Are we more? And I feel that's what I got feelings. I'm still domesticated. How do I really become free, like the buffalo, where that spirit level? And even in my academic work, I've got so much that's still sort of imprisoned within the colonial system of education, and how can I free myself even greater? So I'd love to be part of that conversation. Yes, please.
Well, we will develop that idea some more and then launch it, probably in Zoom like we are today.
Perfect. Yes.
Yeah.
I really liked how you mentioned involving the students in the learning too, because I think that's really, really important. You know, my son was good at math, me not so much, but I remember in school they put him in groups, and one girl was having trouble understanding. Maybe they were doing times or something, you know, because it's 5th grade. And he thought of a way to help her. And the teacher came by, and so he was explaining to the teacher how he was, you know, and she didn't like that at all. That wasn't the way.
She couldn't understand it. And that's what I tell my students. I said, I got my degrees, but where I learned to teach is from listening to my students. It's my students who taught me, because usually they know what they need. They may not know how to, but they know the right questions to ask. And when they put those questions out there, it gets me thinking. It's always that hard when they say, is there another way to do this? And I go, oh, and I've already given them 2 or 3 ways. And I says, yeah, there's got to be another way, because the 2 or 3 ways hasn't hit them. So I said, well, let me think of that. I can't answer you today, but there must be, and let's find it together. Because those words are saying, yes, we need multiple ways of seeing and doing and understanding. And I really do have faith that our students do know the way much better than we do. Because I always think, I went from this time where I had a student who was a daughter of someone I went to high school with, and now I'm getting people that are the grandchildren of people I went to high school with. So I've seen myself age through this, and I said, I'm an old man now, and what do I really know what it's like to be an 18-year-old? I knew what it was like before, but it's a different world, and I need to listen to what they're going through, because their experiences are different than mine.
I really appreciate that concept. I think math, just on a very superficial level, it can be just, it's not something that people always relate to and understand. And I think to make it so accessible, to tie it back to the students, what they need, what they want, to bring it back to their communities and demonstrate how math exists everywhere is really, really remarkable, that you're doing that type of work. And it looks like in the chat, I got my degrees in teaching, but where I learned to teach is from, okay, so he was quoting you. Yeah, no, that's really, I think that's so impactful. And I think sometimes, especially in kind of more of our mainstream Western sort of teachings, that ability to be creative or to extend past what the rigid formula is doesn't always exist. So I think your methods are really enlightened, and that's great. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to, Reno, what you were saying is that was our conception of the fire circles is we actually we wanted to learn more ourselves. So we developed a professional development where we would be developed, and we figured it'll work for us. And we did, we tested it. And then we wanted just to bring others to help us develop further. So it's, yes, this circles that we keep building and learning from each other is the only solution we can get.
When I was a college student, before cell phones and computers were invented, I had to battle my way through mathematics because I went to boarding school and got the message loud and clear that because I was a native, that I would not do well in mathematics. And because I was a female native, that I might as well just give it up. So I had to fight hard in college to make up for some deficits. But what really, really helped motivate me to learn was anything that was relevant to the culture that I came from. I am Crow and Turtle Mountain Chippewa, but I was raised on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. So I was able to find a dice game that women played in the evening after all their chores were done. And it was an opportunity for them to play this game and gossip at the same time. And it just sounded so fun. And as many of our tribal games are, there was betting involved. And so they would have these nice items that they would win if they won this game of chance. And because it was from a tribe that I knew a lot about, that just launched me into a position where, had I had enough financial aid to keep going, I had enough credits to almost be a math major. And I never started college thinking I was ever going to do good with any math course. So if Maggie keeps twisting my arm, I will do a webinar on this Northern Cheyenne Women's Plumstone game and share it with everyone that has participated in our webinars. So maybe that can be of some use to you in your teaching.
Very much. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments? We have just a few more minutes left.
I do, Maggie.
Yeah, go ahead, Yogita.
This is Yogita. I work at AIHEC with Native languages. And I'm just really sitting here deep in thought. I really appreciate the presentation and our program that invited the speaker. No, it wasn't quite what I expected, because just watching what's happening in the schools on the reservation, you know, when people start talking about teaching math, you know, we're looking, you know, why about just introducing some native culturally based problem solving and even objects into the problems that they have to deal with, you know, like, for example, you know, counting beads instead of I don't know, sticks or something like that. But also what I saw is that you're going for more of a theoretical approach type. And what I would really, which doesn't exist. I mean, there are so many things that you have to create nowadays from ground up when we're talking about the indigenizing science. And one of the ideas too that sort of connected was that right now there are these native medium schools or immersion schools that try to translate math curricula into their languages, and I would really like to introduce this type of a conversation to the native language networks, to the native language instructor networks, and you know, just have that conversation going, you know, because if we're just teaching about you know, approaches to teach math so that the subject gets comfortable to native students, you know, but you know, where do we take it further? You know, we have math for, let's say, the elementary grades. Where does it go next? You know, algebra, geometry, what about the engineering language? And there's a lot of vocabulary too that gets either interpreted or it has to be created as new when it comes to these kinds of subjects, because you know, the world is developing constantly, you know, and even computer language and programming language and everything is developing, and these kinds of things need to develop together with that. So anyway, so I'm just it's just really thoughts, but you know, I think that this topic, it really needs to be brought into the native language networks, and it would be some really good discussions, and you know, maybe that would result in even more of these different theoretical approaches. And I also appreciated your cross-linguistic connections and going all the way to Vedas and things like that. I'm a first language Lithuanian speaker, so Lithuanian is considered to be the closest language to Sanskrit. So I know what you're talking about. But anyway, once again, really appreciated the presentation.
Thank you. And I guess I'd just like to add on to that. I've seen the research, and the Maoris have done a great job of incorporating their language into their education system. And one thing they made a great progress on is they took their fishing nets, have, you know, the one fish goes this way, one part of the net goes this way. So that's a, you know, like a coordinate system. And they have that word for which one is going. They have a Maori word. And when they incorporated those Maori words to graphs of the Y, you know, the Y direction and the X direction, their students started clicking because they came from fishing villages. They use that in their language. So those are the kinds of things. And I guess that's why I'm more at the theoretical level, because the practical level is different for each language, for each group. And so that's where we need to work with those experts and find which words and which parts of the language connect what type of math, because that will really empower our learners. Yeah.
And I'm muted. We just have one more question in the chat. Dr. Littlecrow, do you have any input on developing math terminology in Indigenous languages?
Yes, it's the problem is I'm a single language speaker. You know, my wife's Thai, so I pick up other languages and such, but it's the thing I am is there's so many different languages. So it's what I'd like to do is move into a project where I'm focused more on one language, then I could see the specifics from people who have that, you know, have learned a second language or and such. I don't have specifics, but I do know that within the language, I was always taught, and I believe the culture is in the language. Our culture is embedded. And that's why when we keep speaking our language, we keep our culture alive. And if we lose our language, the culture dies with it most often. And the same thing with the mathematics is, as we look through it, the mathematics of our people, I looked at a dictionary translating some words by a Jesuit for the Turtle Mountain Chippewa, well, the Chippewas up in that area. But the way the words were used for the geometry, it shows that they had a different geometry than the Euclidean geometry. They saw it more in a natural base, the way they describe things. And so that's what I mean is we need to get out of our silos. And as a math educator, I need to work with linguists. I need to work with the native speakers and the elders. And then together we will find those connections.
All right. Well, I think that is it for today. If you do have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me and I'll pass them along to Dr. Little Crow. So again, our just most sincere gratitude and appreciation to you, Dr. Little Crow, for being here with us today and for presenting. We are so grateful. And to all of you attending, thank you for being here. Continue to be on the lookout for the next webinars coming up in our AIHEC Health webinar series, and we will see you soon. Thank you so much.
Miigwech, everyone.